Hey,
Ooh, hey, how are you?
girl, look, I am good. And you?
I'm good. I'm loving that turquoise blue.
Girl, we're in the same
I know
spirit
we got
right
the
here
same,
today.
got the blue thing going on, which the psychology of blue is a warm color and it makes people feel good.
Ooh, so this morning I awakened and I thought, I want to feel good, right?
Yes, and
Yeah,
I did too. And
I love
so
it.
great minds think alike. How you been doing? How's everything
Hey,
going?
it's been really good. Life's lifing. We use
Yes.
that terminology a lot. And what I like to think about it when we say that is that we get an opportunity to have breath in our bodies, to be able to have another day, to be able to rise up and to live and to breathe
Yeah.
and to fulfill the purposes of which we're called to,
Yeah.
even though we may not feel like it. But I think that's a beautiful thing because otherwise, you're like, oh my God, I'm going through all of this. No, it's another opportunity to make life great. Start where you
Yes.
are, clear the slate, and just start fresh, move forward.
Absolutely. To all the vibrant women out there, I hope you have been living vibrantly, that vivacious, indispensable, that brave woman,
Mm,
that radiant woman, that nice woman,
absolutely. That part.
and that trustworthy woman. I'm hoping that that's what's been happening with you. I tell you, have you been living vibrantly?
I have.
Okay.
And I love the fact that we've set out goals for us as women to
Yes,
really
yes.
achieve. And so you're right. Have you been living vibrantly? Because again, we're talking about, you know, and please excuse me because I have to look at my little notes right here because I don't want to mess this up, because that vibrant womanhood is really about living what you just said, but a life full of energy, strength, and enthusiasm, living boldly, radiating positivity and thriving in every season. And I think that's important, that it is important that we think about how we're living
Yeah.
each and every day.
Well, when you say thriving in every season, we really want to hone in on that because there's seasons in your life
Mhm.
when it is not a thriving season. There's seasons in your life when that's the last thing on your mind as you feel
Mhm.
like you're thriving.
Oh yeah, the struggle's real. Like
And
for real, for real.
and so I think helping the women through our woman journey
Mhm.
is to understand that even if you're not thriving in the season, how to get back to that.
Mhm.
And it's not a timeline. It's not a timeline for it.
Yeah, and I think we sometimes make a
Yeah.
mistake
And
because we
yeah.
think we have to achieve certain things by a certain age, and then the culture puts pressure on us, the
Yeah.
world puts pressure on us to do exactly that, to live in these seasons that are supposed to take on the characteristics of what others tend to think.
Yeah. And what we think. And as I think of that is really appropriate because today is the day that it's been about 30 years in the making. And it's the day that I'm going to be sharing in the most vulnerable way my story,
Yeah.
a part of my story, the beginning of my story,
Mhm.
um, something that God shared with me that I was going to do, that I was supposed to be doing
30 years ago.
30 years ago.
I think together we found strength and courage.
Hmm.
And as we set on this journey to empower women through emotional, spiritual, and personal growth, I think it's befitting that today is that day.
Yeah,
Today is that start of removing the mask
yeah,
and being authentic because so many need to hear the stories. We overcome by the words of our testimony.
yes,
And
absolutely.
if we don't speak that test out and show how we've overcome that test, then people will never know. And so they'll look at you and they'll think, oh my God, she
Yeah.
has it all together. In every season of her life, she has thrived. And, she makes it look like it's so simple. But,
Well, yeah, that's
you know,
because we show the thriving pieces.
hmm
We don't show when we're not. And that's the kind of a human
hmm
characteristic. And but what we see with humans is that people thrive on other people
Mhm.
not thriving, which is
I
crazy,
know, isn't that
which is
crazy?
a whole nother,
Yeah,
that's
we're
a
gonna
whole
talk
nother
about
show.
that down the road,
But
however, today.
yeah, for me, it is a day that when I think of it, I think of what it takes is courage.
Mhm,
And because of who I am, who God called me to be as a expert and a doctor in what I know, how to help fix
mhm,
other people, how to help guide other people, how to
mhm,
help implant in them
mhm.
uh, different perspectives and different things on life. They don't know where all that has come from. So I've been able to
Wow.
kind of hide behind my professionalism and hide who the girl
Mhm,
that I want to take everybody back um, to kind of set who I am and how I became who I am today.
mhm,
So let me just start. I grew up in a church that I thank God for my foundation. However, sometimes with religion, you can stack on legalistic things, you
mhm.
can stack on man-made things.
Correct.
And when you grow up in that, you don't know. You grow up in
Mhm.
it
You know what you
and
know.
you know what you know.
Mhm,
So, and I say that because it has something to do with my story. So, growing up in a church where, everything was wrong and everybody was going to hell. If you did anything, if you look sideways, you're going. I mean, it was a lot. So, that's a lot of pressure. That's
so
a lot of pressure on
so
you.
so within that pressure, was it around the clothing, the hair, the
Yeah, it was
makeup?
around
It
all of
was
that.
around
I
all of
mean,
that.
it was
Okay.
everything you can possibly think of, probably some of the strictest rules
Mhm,
than what people have heard of because people hadn't even heard of the sect of religion that it was, and they were like,
mhm.
"What is that? Are you Kojic? Or we're even deeper than that?" I mean, so without getting wrapped up into
Mhm,
that, the piece of it that when you strive to live a life how you think by the rules,
mhm,
you feel like that you're going to have blessings. You feel like God is blessing your work.
mm.
And so in growing up, I was the girl that because I was a leader, I didn't do everything that I was told to do. I didn't walk by the way the church said. So that brought its own thing about, oh, is she really saved? Is she really a child of God? All of that.
So
That's not the
so
story.
that's not the story,
That's not the
but it's
story.
important to note that that was your spiritual
That was my
foundation.
spiritual
That was your
foundation.
point of
Yes.
reference for how you were choosing to live in this world.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And one main thing was we did not believe in going to the doctor.
Mm.
So we believed in divine healing.
Mhm.
When you got sick, you didn't go to the doctor. You didn't seek help because God is a healer.
Mhm.
He's Jehovah Rapha. He's
Yes.
a healer.
He
So
is.
we believed
Yeah.
that to that degree. So it has to do everything with my story. So you know, growing up, being this girl, sunshine, there's a lot of things that happened, a lot of death and all that. But getting to what affected me, um, got married right out of college to my college sweetheart. Um, we got started on the journey of marriage, started on the journey of living. And when we decided to have the family, I that wasn't happening.
Mm.
When you think, okay, I'm doing it the right way, because I saw a lot of girls in the church
Mhm.
get pregnant,
Yeah.
teenage pregnancy. So now you're doing it the right way
Mhm.
and you can't have a baby. And I
Mm.
didn't understand that. So that was the first layer that this is a difficult thing.
Mhm.
They weren't talking about infertility back then.
Mhm.
And I couldn't get pregnant, went to the doctor and found out, the issues that I was having, which, my pituitary gland was not, I wasn't ovulating.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of things. And as we talk about our womanhood
Mhm.
journey, there's so many complications with our bodies that we need
Mm.
to talk about. It's okay
Yeah.
to talk about. I didn't know back then. I was the ripe age of 26 years old.
So you're a young
So I was a
woman,
young woman
never
and
believed in going to the
never
doctor.
believed in
Now you
going to the
find
doctor.
yourself in this
Yeah,
position.
so I guess we started trying to maybe at 25
Mhm.
and found out, this was the issue. And they said, we can give you medicine. And I said, no, we're going to pray.
Wow.
So we went into the diligent praying
Mhm.
and praying, and nothing happened. And of course, you're hearing things from people, God can do everything. And, he gave Sarah a baby. And I'm like, I don't want to be 90 having no baby. Don't be telling me that story.
That part, yeah,
But,
yeah, but
you hold on to
but
it because,
it grows your faith.
yeah,
It instills in you greater faith to believe in the impossible.
yeah, that's what it was.
Mhm.
And so
But the reality.
the reality, it didn't happen. The prayer and all that. I'm not saying prayer didn't work. We went back to the doctor and took the fertility medicine and got pregnant right away pregnant. And they told us it was a 10% chance
Mhm,
of having twins. And but twins ran in my then husband's side of the family. So we were like, okay, you don't care, you just want to have a
mhm,
baby. So got pregnant, went along, and then I started having a miscarriage.
mm,
And so, of course, that's so devastating because now you feel like, oh my God, you answer
yeah.
prayer. Go to the doctor and find out that I was having triplets, actually. So I miscarried one.
Oh, wow.
And then, I was
Mhm,
carrying two. So now, just the roller coaster of emotions. It's like, oh my God, you had three babies and now it's
mhm,
two left. Who would have ever thought? You just
mhm,
thought you had the one. So thus began a, pregnancy where they're really honed in and being careful with you.
mhm,
I'm being careful. I had started my business at that time, so I could kind of do, I could have my own schedule and was working things like that. And then went into preterm labor. So everything else was fine until
mhm.
I went into preterm labor. Didn't know I was in labor until my water broke because if it's your first time, and I just
Mhm.
was used to my
Yeah,
babies doing all of this
yeah.
in the stomach. So anyway, so got to the hospital. They couldn't do the cerclage. If some of you women understand what this is
Mhm,
all about when they sew up your uterus. So they put me on all kind of meds and really
mhm.
comatose because they were like, these babies, they got to survive. We were only 26 weeks at the time. By week 27, that it was time to come.
Mm,
And so I had my twins. Little Charles, he was 2 pounds and 2 ounces. Chelsea was a pound and 9 ounces. And had these little bitty human beings
mhm. Fitting your
that
hand
when you
literally, right?
really fit in my
Wow.
my ex-husband, their dad's hand,
Mhm,
because he has big large hands. These little human beings, when you see the
mm,
glory of God in this little life,
mhm,
who yet can open their eyes, they're just these teeny tiny
mhm.
beings. But they came and told us that our son was fine, of course, but being 2 pounds and 2 ounces, you're
Yeah.
not fine, but his body seemed fine. We just had to grow him. And my daughter had a
Mm,
heart defect called tautology off a low.
mhm,
The time I didn't know what that was. They said her aorta did not develop.
mhm. Okay.
I didn't know what that meant, but
Mhm.
my innocence was like, God is going to give her a new heart.
Yeah.
So she's going to be fine.
Oh,
And we're going to just watch our babies grow outside. I said, we're going to be here with them every step of the way. And God is going to bless these wonderful children
yeah.
that He has, given to us. And then that was one day of faith and bliss and me
Yeah.
thinking and all the celebration of everybody. Oh my God, these twins are
Mhm.
here. The next day, there was a cold blue
Mm.
called.
Wow.
I had been in the hospital long enough to know what cold blue was because
Mhm,
back then, this was before ER, before Grey's Anatomy, before any of these
mhm,
TV shows that we didn't know nothing about what
mhm,
really happens in the hospital. Um, Something gripped my heart because I had two babies in the NICU, which is the
mm,
neonatal
mhm.
intensive care unit called NICU. And I started praying immediately and I said, God, I have two babies down there. Don't let it be my babies. I got a phone call. They said, Mrs. Gladney, you need to get down here. My
Mm.
mother was there.
Wow.
They got me down there. Incidentally, my husband at the time, he had gone to get an hour to the hour film development to
Oh, to
just to
get
get the
pictures of
films
the babies.
developed,
Oh,
and that was before cell phones. I mean, this was,
yeah.
this
Yeah.
was back in the 90s, so we didn't have all the conveniences.
Mhm.
So he had left, so he didn't know what's going
Oh,
on.
wow.
Um, they wheel me down there, and I go down there and I see all of these doctors. It was about 3 or 4 people, and remember my baby was just like this, it was our son, little Charles,
Mhm.
and they're all pumping on
But
his
that's the one they
heart.
said they thought
That's
would
the
be
one that
okay.
said he was gonna be
Wow.
okay, so that's not what you was
Mhm.
expecting.
Mhm.
So they're pumping on his heart, and all of these people are standing around, and I'm just, there with my mom. We start praying, and I start quoting scriptures where 2 or 3 are gathered together. You can ask
Mhm.
what you will, it shall be done. And just this intense praying she was praying, and they just kept going. And one of the nurses would look back at me, and I could tell by the look on the face. But I
Mhm.
was like, God got this.
Yeah.
He got it.
Yeah.
And we'll unpack this later because this is a very deep.
Mhm.
I looked up and I actually saw God turn his back. I
Mm.
saw that. And I lost my mind. And I started screaming and yelling, don't let my baby die. Don't let my baby die. Because I felt like, well, God has abandoned me. So now he doesn't have this control anymore. It's up to them.
Mhm.
I got to tell these people how important it is not to let my baby die. So, so I screamed for probably 45 minutes. And they finally looked and said that, we're so sorry. I was just in a state of, I was in a state of shock because I saw my God, whom I've served all my life, turn his
Mhm.
back.
Yeah.
And then they couldn't keep him. So for me, I just, it was like, your out of body experience is
Mhm.
happening now. And so my husband comes back. I'm in the room with our daughter because they had to separate her because she
Mhm.
was so sick. So now I'm in the
Mm.
room with the sick baby, and he comes in and finds out, and he falls out. So it's just a lot going on. I still can't walk
Mhm.
because of all of what has happened the whole week and been in the hospital with
Mhm.
under medication. And thus began this journey that I went from this sunshine girl to this person that I know nothing about, but now I still have one child and she's
Mhm.
very sick. So immediately at 27, you're not thinking where you're going to be buried. What,
Mhm.
what what do we do
Mm.
now? I've been to tons of funerals by this time because of how I grew up,
Yeah.
but they're asking you, and we're not going to be here forever. What do you
Mhm.
mean? So we did have somebody that my husband worked with that had a mortuary. So they said, don't worry about everything.
Mhm.
We'll do everything. Um, then that night in the hospital, they bought me my son,
Mm.
and holding him there, they let me keep him for 5 hours. You can't imagine what it's like for 5 hours holding
Mhm.
your child that is cold. And I prayed the entire time. I still
Mhm.
had some belief of faith
Yeah.
that God is going to raise him. He rose Lazarus.
Right.
And so I prayed that he take my breath
Mhm.
and give it to my child
Mm.
to let
Wow.
him live. I prayed intensely. I called my sister. She was praying. I'm like,
Mhm.
please, I need this. I need God to do this. Just take my breath. When I look back and I think, if he would have,
Mhm.
I wouldn't be here to help whoever needs to hear this story.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wouldn't be here to bring the beautiful children that are going to touch this world
Mhm.
in this way. But in that way, that's where I was.
Yeah.
And they came, and I didn't want to give them to them.
Yeah.
The mother in me, like, what are you going to do with my baby? They said, you
Yeah.
don't want to know.
Well, such a young age,
Oh my
and
God.
to not be fully equipped for this journey that you were on.
Nobody's equipped.
It's amazing to me because so many end up on that path, and it's just so unexpected.
Yes.
But to hear you today say, "Now I know."
Now I
Now
know.
I know, but it's getting to the now I know that God can use this for good. It's getting to that part
Yes.
that is challenging. So here you are in the hospital and you're holding your baby and you're trying to trust and believe that God is going to move.
Yeah.
How did you get to that place of resolve?
Well,
Because
that is so much,
yeah,
it's so much in
it's a path
between.
there
Yeah.
that because you still got the other baby to be
Well,
concerned
yeah,
about,
I
so you
was
got to
gonna
be
say
strong for
it was
her.
so much because you're just when I gave him away and they took him out, I could see that like yesterday.
Wow.
And I didn't know at the time we needed an autopsy.
Mhm.
We had already said that because we didn't know why he died,
Mhm.
but I didn't know what that meant, which is why they said you
Mhm.
don't want to know what we're going to do.
Mhm.
Um, I'm glad they didn't tell me. So we go and we plan a memorial service,
Mhm.
graveside service. Um, I have to go and get some clothes to bury him. He's
Mhm.
2 pounds, so it's dog
Dog
clothes.
clothes, yeah.
I'm still having to be wheeled around in a
Mhm.
wheelchair. So by the time we do have the service, for me to be in the family car and people pulling over to the side of the road because
Mhm.
I was in the car, it was like I was in a twilight zone. And I remember getting there and seeing all the people because people just come to funerals. We
Mhm.
know we
Yeah.
know a lot of people.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't couldn't tell you what the service. I was just I was in a shock. I was in a state of shock. I remember them lowering the casket, but before, so our wake. Let me tell you about our wake because our baby was in a little blue and white gingham
Mhm.
check casket. The wake was at our house.
Mm.
They bought the
Oh,
casket
wow.
into our house, into my
Mhm.
bedroom. And when I saw him, I remember thinking, I'm not going to give him back.
Mm.
I'm going to keep my baby here.
Wow.
To people, that may sound, I'm just telling you what was
Yeah.
happening with me
Well,
as a
with you
mother.
being in the moment, being
As
a
a
young
mother,
mother going through such
yes,
suffering
I
and
was like,
loss, that's traumatic.
I'm, I'm just, yeah. And his head, I didn't
Mhm.
know what had happened. It was
Mhm.
just a lot. So by the time we got to the cemetery, the services were over and putting him in the ground. And all the people that were
Mhm.
there, the laughter, the everything that I just thought, I just buried my baby and everybody's
Mhm.
laughing because they're
Mm.
happy to see each other.
Yeah.
But now we have to rush back to the hospital because then begin the journey with
Wow.
Chelsea. So back to the hospital with your very, very sick child who,
Mhm.
when you don't have an aorta, your blood and oxygen cannot exchange.
Mhm.
So guess what? You're not ever growing.
Mm.
I didn't know the depth of what this meant.
Mhm.
Your oxygen levels should be at 97, 98. Her oxygen was at 56, 60. So it
Mm.
was never enough oxygen in her body.
Right.
Um, this journey and all of these pieces are like almost a book by itself, but this
Mhm.
journey with her in this NICU, I would go into the hospital. I was there every
Mhm.
day, just all day. My life just stopped. I'm
Mhm.
just with my child. Um, I would pray to make her numbers go up so I can know that
Mhm.
God is hearing me and her
Mm.
numbers would go down.
Oh, goodness.
So, what that told me was I don't need to pray. It is something about me that is that is,
Mm.
my child is gone. You have a miscarriage. Now, this
Mhm.
one you're buried now. So, I stopped praying. You just respond and react. Chelsea was a month old,
Mhm.
and I asked for everything about little Charles. Come to find out, they showed me his x-rays. They had never showed them to us before.
Mhm.
And I saw something on the x-ray that was not right. And I said, "What is that?" And that's when the doctor said,
Mhm.
"We're so sorry. It was an it was an accident
Oh my goodness.
that your son passed away because they put the umbilical cord and
Mhm.
they pushed it too far and it looped around in his heart and called cardiac arrest." So now I began a whole nother emotional
Mhm.
because they murdered my baby. They killed my baby. it wasn't intentional, but they killed my child. So now here's
Mhm.
another piece of God.
Mhm.
How did you let them
Yeah.
kill my baby? Why didn't you stop the hand? Chelsea's too, she's too fragile to move
Mhm.
from that hospital. So now I'm looking at all these doctors like they've been
Wow.
here with us for a month and nobody
Mhm.
told us. And if I wouldn't have asked for this, I wouldn't
Then it
have
would have been
known
silent.
that they killed my
Oh
child.
my gosh.
So me trying to reconcile everything that was going on, hearing this news,
Mhm.
but my baby's still so fragile, I can't touch her because their
Mhm.
skin is translucent. Just learning about all this stuff. I was researching, I was looking through encyclopedias,
Mhm.
everything I could to
Yeah.
find out about her. Um, Now we have this devastating news. So I
Mm.
began journaling, medical journals, and all of the stuff, learning as much as I could along her journey of
Mhm.
not trusting anybody. I mean, in the hospital, it was so much for a 27-year-old girl
Yeah.
to try to maintain
Yeah.
outside of all the people calling, and everybody
Mhm.
was calling and either praying for us or not, or saying it was just so much happening. It was so much
Mhm.
going on.
Yeah. There are a lot of layers.
Yeah, it's so. This is why I've never told this story because it's so many layers to this
Yeah.
story. So as she continued on in her life,
Mhm.
she crashed by that November. They were born in October. By Thanksgiving,
Mhm.
she did a crash, and we
Mhm.
didn't. She never really recouped from that.
Mhm.
All this time she's on life support. I'm trying to reconcile, if we don't need the doctors, why is my baby have to live on life support? Why can't she breathe on her own? Why is
Mhm.
God not helping her
Wow.
to breathe? It was so many things that was
Mhm.
happening. We went through a time that by Christmas and New Year's, I told myself she would live if she lived to the new year,
Mhm.
because God, everything bad that happened to us was going to happen in this year, and God was going to give us a better
Right.
year.
Yeah.
I mean, anything that you
Yeah.
can
Stretching
hold
for
on
hope,
to,
looking for
I was
something to pull
looking
you into a
for
better place.
hope, and
Yeah.
it just wouldn't come. So January came, it got to the place that they came and said, "We cannot do anymore. You have to
Mm.
make a decision." I said, "I'm not getting ready to, you're not
Mhm.
taking this off of my child. Oh no, I'm going to leave this hospital with a baby."
Mm.
And I'm like, I'm not going to make a decision that,
Mhm.
you can pull a plug on her. We're going to do everything we can. In the process, the hospital, I mean, like I said, there's so many layers. The hospital, they eventually took the nurse that was taking care of my baby like it was hers, and
Mhm.
she and I had grown this
Mhm.
bond. They took her off of my baby because they said we gotten too close.
Mm.
And I was intimidating the other nurses because I would ask questions and I knew what I mean, when I tell you the journey
Mhm.
was insanely crazy,
Mhm.
Chelsea didn't live but a week after they took her.
Mm.
That day, the pastor came in, everybody's praying. The church had done a church wide, nationwide fast because the
Mhm.
church was in different parts of the United States. They did a nationwide fast
Mhm.
for Chelsea. My mother had said she had a dream that she was going to pass away, and she
Mm.
was in pink and white casket. On that day, when she went down, they tried to resuscitate, and the more they did it, I could just tell her little body just couldn't handle anymore.
Yeah.
So here I was, the third child, gone. I just sat there,
Mhm.
and the doctor came in and he fell out. He found out that Chelsea died. He fell to the floor. The impact that was made
Mhm.
throughout all of this, he said, "I just wanted to give you one baby. I wanted
Oh
to
my
give you
God.
one baby."
Wow.
So
Yeah.
now we're bearing another child. It was the same, it was a
Mhm.
repeated thing. They come in, they pink and white casket, gingham check, bring it to
Wow.
our house. This time it was a big funeral. We had
Mhm.
a actual service. Um, and there's so much I could go into, but for the just the sake of
Mhm.
people understanding that now, after everybody's gone,
Mhm.
and it's just me
Yeah.
and my husband.
Yeah.
This broke us, and it broke our marriage. Started to break because people would say now 24 years later, well, what happened? People don't ever know your story.
That part.
This
Yeah.
began the
Yeah.
breaking
Yeah.
because I broke
Yeah.
as a person.
Well,
um
trying to reconcile as a young couple, I can't even imagine with you both being so young and going through just the trauma of that impact of not just one child, but a second child who ended up there being um, negligence around his circumstances, and then the the baby that um, was least likely to hang on, hung
she hung
on.
on.
She hung on.
And do you know what they told us? They said she has an advantage in the
Hmm.
beginning. I need y'all to hear this, and this is no shade on anybody else that's hearing it.
Hmm.
They said little black girls fight more.
Mm.
We fight.
Wow.
She lived longer than they ever could imagine
Oh my God.
because of the fighting spirit.
Wow.
I need y'all to hear that. We have this
That's
fighting
powerful.
spirit
Yeah.
that held her on way longer than she
Mm.
should have in their mind and
Hmm.
research. And so the strength, so I
Wow.
tried to pour my strength into her
Hmm.
the 3.5 months that she lived,
Yeah.
that the spirit
Yeah.
of a black girl,
You know what? That is so
it is
powerful
so powerful.
because if you look at so many of us now,
Yes.
honestly,
Yeah.
it is the strength that we often, untold,
Yeah.
have to pull from to pull ourselves through to to get to that place where we sometimes are not certain that we really going to make it, right? Because I'm
Absolutely.
sure there were days you thought to yourself, I'm not going to do this. I can't do this. But somehow you find deep inside that ability to be able to pull something. So to say God was at work in her life then, to give her what she needed for
Yeah.
that moment, so
Yes.
you would have what you need now, what you need now, and for
Lord.
your other children
Yes.
now. Oh my
my
God.
other
I mean,
my other um all the women out there understanding,
mm,
but it wasn't easy in this
wow.
non-thriving season.
Hmm.
So what happened to me was I went into a deep dark depression,
Hmm.
and then I became suicidal. I was going to counseling. People need to understand I was in counseling. But what happened to me was so devastating on a
Hmm.
spiritual level because of
Hmm.
how I grew up.
Yeah.
So a
Yeah.
counselor could not do the
Hmm.
spiritual work
Right.
because I felt like who I thought God was
Hmm.
all crumbled and I didn't
Mm.
know who he was anymore.
Wow.
Nobody can't pick you up out of that one.
Yeah.
I went, you know, I had to because things started happening in in my with my in-laws and the families, and I don't know if there was
Wow.
a blame. I don't know what happened, but everybody changed.
Hmm.
This change, this situation changed so many people, and it changed me. I didn't have love for myself, and I told my husband to leave. He deserved somebody to love him
Mm.
because I
Wow.
couldn't love. I felt like my love was buried with my children. I didn't
Hmm.
love myself. So all I wanted to do was go and be with him. I was done because nobody on this earth understood, because
Understood.
everybody's
Yeah.
like, you can get over this. God is going to help. All of the Christian
Yeah.
tudes that we
Yeah.
say that we shouldn't say,
Yeah.
and the people tudes that people don't know that
Yeah.
they shouldn't say to people that are
Yeah.
grieving. Oh, they're in a much better place. The stuff that we
Yeah.
have said,
We say
which,
sometimes the
yeah,
things that really need to be left unsaid.
but
Who
we're not
offered?
trained.
Well, we're not
We're not
trained. We're not
trained to
equipped.
know.
Who just wrapped their arms around you and said, "Baby,
There were, you know
just
what?
let it out. Grieve."
No, people didn't know how because people think that being strong is not crying.
Hmm.
People think that being strong is it's in God's hands and
Hmm.
He's got you and He's care. It's the stuff that people say. oh, God's going to give you more children. He's going
Mhm.
to, it's like nobody wants to acknowledge that you're in pain and
Mhm.
feel your pain.
Yeah.
And so, because we're not trained,
Yeah.
when I got to the suicidal place and I planned out my suicide, and nobody knew this. My counselor, nobody knew
Mhm.
because they wanted to put me on antidepressants. I didn't need that. I
Mhm.
didn't need to, this pain didn't need to be masked. You need to
Right.
walk
We
through the
needed to
pain.
deal with it.
But
Yeah.
people don't
Yeah.
know how to help you
Yeah.
kind of do that. And so I planned it out and I thought, well, I didn't have a gun and I couldn't have had the courage to shoot myself, and most
Mhm.
women don't.
Mhm.
Hanging yourself sounded just so horrible.
Yeah.
I thought if I cut my wrist, that
Mm.
I won't bleed to death in time, and then they'll catch me, and
Mhm.
it'll be like they'll put me in a psych ward.
Mhm.
Same thing with the pills. I'd heard people they
Mhm.
had to pump their stomach, and now,
Wow.
and I'm like, okay, so how do I get this done? And then I said the easiest way is just to carbon dioxide. You have a
Mhm.
garage, go in there. We didn't have a garage. It was like every way that
Mhm.
I thought of.
Yeah.
But then, because the church that I grew up in says if you commit suicide, you can't go to heaven. And I was
Mhm.
trying to get to heaven with my babies. So
Mm.
there was this
Wow.
conflict, and I didn't know what would be true.
Yeah.
But I thought, just in case, and I hate to do all this and
Mhm.
not be with my
Yeah.
babies,
Yeah.
so I'll get somebody to kill me.
Mm.
I wasn't going to
Wow.
hire them. I'm just telling you, these are the things
So
that you
so the
don't want to
yeah,
talk
so the
about.
reality of what your mind can take you through during trauma is a very real thing. And and I applaud you for having the courage to share,
Yeah.
because a lot of times we're afraid to, or ashamed of even telling anyone that we had these thoughts.
Well, and of course, because of what I do for a living now,
Mm.
now I will, when I work one on one, if it's
Mhm.
necessary, I
Yeah.
will let them know.
Yeah.
But what I figured out was I was going to let somebody else kill me. And so I would go, and I always have to chuckle when I say this, and I've told this
Mhm.
this part of the story a few times in
Mhm.
public. For whatever reason, I thought I'm going to Detroit and I'm going to walk the streets.
Oh God.
I know, no, anybody, trust me, it had nothing to do with anybody. It
It was
was
just in
just
your mind
in
and
my
what you heard.
mind
Yeah.
what I heard. And
Mhm.
if I walk the streets of
Mhm.
Detroit, somebody
Mm.
will kill me. They will find me, and I'll just be a Jane
Mhm.
Doe on the side of the street.
Wow.
Because what I told myself was, I saw how easy
Mhm.
everybody got through
Mhm.
this because it didn't impact them like it impacted me.
Right. Yeah.
Everybody else went on with their life. I said, well, if I die, they're going to go on with their life. They're
Mhm.
going to be fine.
Mhm.
They'll cry for me, but they'll get over it. So I thought about that. And then what stopped me there was because I was like, I'd heard this story. I was like, oh my God, no, then
Mhm.
somebody will kidnap you and you'll be their slave, their sex slave in their basement,
Well,
and you're
you know
still
what?
going to die. I was like, I can't die. So as I
Wow.
think of that, and on a humorous, even though it's
Mhm.
nothing humorous about it, when I
Yeah.
think back of how God spared me,
Mm.
then I did give up the
Mhm.
fact of the dying. And when
Mhm.
people are saying God won't put more on you than you can bear, I want to tell everybody,
Mhm.
please stop saying that, because
Yeah.
that's not a scripture in the
Mhm.
Bible.
Mm.
That is not what he said. But that almost
Yeah.
made me lose my
Yeah.
mind, because I said, he needs to know I can't bear this, so
Mhm.
I'm going to lose my mind, so he'll know that.
Yeah.
So this stuff just really trips people up. And so, of course, with all of this,
Mhm.
I grew up singing. I've been singing all of my life. I never sang another note for 4
Wow.
years. I did not sing because there was no joy that
Mhm.
was in my heart. And
Mm.
it was, it felt like I became mute. I,
Mhm.
I couldn't even, I couldn't even. Um, Let me get to the part of redemption. I don't know whether to call it redemption, but the fighting spirit of my children. I want to see them one day. So
Yeah.
I can expedite my life.
Mhm.
I'm in counseling, went to counseling for two
Mhm.
years. So I advocate
Mhm.
counseling, went to a support group for 4 years
Mhm.
just to be normal, just to
Mhm.
be around people that felt the pain that you felt
Mhm.
and didn't make you feel ashamed that
Yeah.
you still,
Yeah.
because as we went on to then have more children, the scary part about that was, are we going to let anybody know this? Because just because you get pregnant don't mean you're going to bring the babies home.
Right.
I learned that I felt like it was me. I had done something to cause all this. So now that these babies, I'm not going to pray
Mhm.
when I'm pregnant, because my mind was
Wow.
just in such a place. And I call it 4 years in the wilderness,
Mhm.
because for 4 years I didn't understand God. I
Mhm.
didn't understand why this happened. And, and at another time, because
Mhm.
when I tell you the story is long, at another time, we did end up going, um, we did end up suing the
Mhm.
doctors, which people,
I'm sure
people,
that itself was
that,
traumatic. Y-
that
y-
right there,
Challenging to do. Yeah.
we ended up in court for an entire week in front of a jury trial.
Mhm.
Now when I see court TV, all
Mhm.
that stuff wasn't even on. LA Law, none of this
Mhm.
stuff was on. You're sitting down in the
Mhm.
courtroom as they're talking about you and your child
Yeah.
and your
Yeah.
baby, and at that time we had, Jordan and Bria, and so we had two other children, and it was a lot with that.
Mhm.
And it took a week, and the jury,
Yeah.
let me say this.
Yeah.
That was almost, how do I say this? The injustice that I felt
Mhm.
when they ultimately said they were not guilty and they saw that they were guilty. We had the x-rays, we had all of this stuff,
And someone had admitted
and
that they
they
made
admitted
an
it.
error.
I wrote it down,
Mhm.
I didn't have it on recording,
Mhm.
but that took a year just to go through all
Wow.
of this. But then that week, and to hear them say not guilty, the anger that I
Mhm.
felt, because truth prevails in the scripture.
Yeah.
None of the stuff that I believed and was
Mhm.
taught happened. So you have to understand, sometimes in our life,
Mhm.
things don't happen as we know it, believe it, in a God way, in a
Yeah.
whatever, and
Yeah.
we'll unpack all of that later.
Yeah.
But I became very angry.
Oh, yeah.
I
Yeah.
became extremely angry at those 12 people that I can almost see their faces today.
Mhm.
And that took a lot of forgiveness.
Yeah.
And the doctors that then changed their story. And it was a lot. It was a lot to that. I'll unpack that at another time, because just going through that
Mhm.
experience itself. Um, but when I tell you this journey, then when I did have other children, I would have panic attacks, because I'm always
Mhm.
thinking that somebody's gonna die.
Yeah.
And my middle daughter, soon after she came here, we had to rush her to the hospital, and she was sick for 7 years of her life, back and
Mhm.
forth to hospital. My son almost died. I mean, when I tell you, it has been this
Mhm.
journey of, and I was always just like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, just the, getting to a place where me understanding how all of this has brought me to this place. When 30 years ago, when I was in the church and I left my church that I grew up in, I left everything that I knew, because nothing
Mhm.
was right, nothing was true.
Mhm.
So redefining yourself on a spiritual level, it's a journey within
Mhm.
itself. And how do you find your way back to understanding that your
Mhm.
God that loves you was loving you during
Yes.
that time?
Yes.
I want to say this to close up this piece. What I did realize when he turned his back, he did the same thing to his son.
He did. Yeah.
And he said, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?
Mhm.
It's because God has emotions. And
Mm.
he didn't want to see me like that, but he wasn't. The natural order of life was taking place.
Yeah.
And he just didn't put his hand in there to stop it,
Yeah.
because he knew at this time
Mhm.
what I was going to be able to do for other people if I had the courage to
Yeah.
share,
Yeah.
which now I am. And I
Mm.
realized that he didn't want to see that,
Yeah.
but he knew it had to take place. He didn't want to see
Yeah.
his son die, but he
Yeah.
knew it had to take place.
Yeah.
So that got reconciled, and I didn't want to leave that part
Mhm.
because it's like, oh my God, see, God does forsake you. No, He doesn't.
Yeah. And
But
it's and
it
it's
took a
really
long
important. It's
time.
really important for people to understand the path, the journey, and the time
Yeah,
because our time is not his time.
yeah,
And oftentimes, as we go through life and we have these horrible, horrific encounters and we don't understand,
yeah.
so many become angry and bitter and just totally give up on God. And so to be able to reconcile that in a
It took a
place
long
that did
time.
not have the
Yeah.
legalism, just from the word of God
Yes.
is so important for all of us to be able to do because we go through things in life that are difficult and challenging. And a lot of time, we just run off and kick rocks or just give up on God.
Yeah.
And we can't do that because He becomes our source of hope
Yeah.
for all things.
Yeah. And just trying to build myself back. But when I was at one church and I was crying because I stopped going to church because
Hmm.
I didn't have the testimony of
Mm.
survivor and all of the stuff, and everybody's giving praise, and here I
Yeah.
was. That wasn't my story.
Yeah.
But that's when he shared with me, and there was a woman on the stage. And he said, do you see the woman on the stage? She was giving her testimony before she was going to sing. And I said, yes. And he said, well, that's what you're going to be doing. You're going to be
Wow.
changing people's lives through your words and through your music. And so the music wasn't like, I don't want
Hmm.
everybody to think I'm
Hmm.
not getting ready out here singing like Fantasia or Yolanda
Wow.
Adams or nothing. That's not my calling, people.
Wow.
My music, it was
Wow.
is through directing and
Hmm.
other things that I do and teaching people music.
Hmm.
And I know every kind of harmony you can imagine. I know every
Wow.
note, every whatever, the other gifting that God has given me.
Something that most people have no idea about you
No,
at all.
they don't because I don't see, but y'all should be able to see it. The people that know me know I
Uh-huh.
love music because I
Wow.
love music. I love to dance. I'm very expressive. I'm all that. That music
Wow.
part of me is God's gift.
Hmm.
And so when he told me that, I said, no, I'm not, because I couldn't imagine ever not crying. I
Wow.
could not imagine being in a place where I was not crying and telling the story. And as you see, even today, I mean, I cry for the 27-year-old girl
Yeah.
that was so lost and nobody could help her
Mm.
because all of my friends were the same age I was. So
Yeah.
they didn't have any
Yeah.
bandwidth to know what
Yeah.
to do. They were young. The pastors
Mhm.
and the ministers were all
Mhm.
saying not the right things.
Yeah.
Can't
Yeah.
even explain that.
And
That's
and and
another
that's
thing to
why those
unpack.
and I hear very strongly that in spite of everything, that 4-year wilderness and all the layers of that journey that were almost placed upon you, that you got to a place, an end, where because you made a decision at some point, you're here today.
Yeah, so
And
let
and
me let
and,
me
and
tell
that's
the people,
amazing.
because again, it is a journey. There's a lot of people that's out there
Mhm.
wrestling with depression.
Mhm.
I know. Depression comes when life throws you a curveball and you don't know what to do
Mhm.
with it.
Yeah.
And the trauma, and what happens, it begins to fester. And
Mhm.
when you don't go through the healing process, it happens. And
Yeah.
it's happened to so many people.
Yeah.
Not that you have to, everybody has felt some symptoms of
Mhm.
depression. But
That's
the
true. Yeah.
clinical depression, when you don't want to get out of the bed and you
Mhm.
have the suicidal thoughts and all
Mhm.
of these things, it's nothing to be ashamed of.
Mhm.
I didn't talk about it for a long time.
Mhm.
Well, I'm talking about it for the first time like this now.
Mhm.
Um, but like I said, I've shared it with individual clients and people
Mhm.
that I work with so that they will know you're not by yourself. There is a way, there is a way out of it.
Mhm.
What was so important is that people don't put a timeline on, one, when you grieve,
Yeah. Yeah.
what that looks like,
Yeah.
what your grief
Yeah.
looks like, because in our nation we
Mhm.
don't really focus a lot on grief. In some
Mhm.
other nations and religions and things, people
Mhm.
they'll wear black for an
Right.
entire
They have on
year.
their
They have on their
morning
mourning clothes to
clothes.
say,
Yeah.
give
Yeah.
me the space.
Right.
Here 2 weeks later,
Yeah.
you're like, okay, how you doing? Oh
Yeah.
girl, you gonna be
Yeah.
better, you gonna get fine.
Yeah.
All of that stuff that we do
Yeah.
that we should not do. So I want to say, as I wrap this part up, because there's
Mhm.
many layers,
Yeah.
but I wanted to begin the obedience part. and you can understand
Mhm.
why
Yeah.
this is difficult, because what I have to do is now go back,
Mhm.
and I want to grab the 27-year-old. I want to hug
Yeah.
her and tell her it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
But it took a whole lot, and
Yeah.
she had to go through a whole lot,
Mhm.
which the understanding of, we never know what people
Mhm.
have been through as to
Yeah.
what makes them how they are now,
Right.
what what makes them do the things they do, say the things they
Yeah.
say. And each one of us have a journey,
Mhm.
and while your story may not be this type of story, and
Mhm.
the devastation, and it's other pieces that I'll talk about later, it's so many different layers. And I feel like that God has called my life to be a it's like almost a sacrificial lamb, so that I can tell people,
Mhm.
and they're not look like what you've been through.
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's not like I'm faking being happy. I'm truly happy when I
Yeah.
when you see me out, and I'm really happy because I'm in that moment. I'm not in any other moment.
Right.
I'm in that
Yeah.
moment, but understanding that through all of this, I had to get to the place that I knew that God was with me all the time.
Yeah.
And He was there to keep
Yeah.
me, that I did not lose my mind.
That's the beautiful part.
And
Yeah.
that right there,
Yeah.
so that helps me. At the time, I
Mhm.
didn't know I was going to be a psychologist. I
Mhm.
didn't know I was going to be studying the mind
Mhm.
and understanding how thoughts and all of
Yeah.
that stuff. But my life have been a living testament
Mhm.
to what now I impart in people.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to be obedient and finally share this story
Well, I
and
applaud you
finally
for your
start
courage.
talking
You're
about
very
it.
brave today because that is a lot,
Yeah,
Doc. And you're helping somebody right now in
yeah.
this moment in ways that um, I don't think you ever thought possible, even
Well,
as a psychologist.
look,
But
and I don't
sharing,
be crying in front of nobody. So me, I mean,
yeah,
I told myself back then I cried
yeah,
so much.
yeah,
I don't know that most people don't
yeah.
know, if you cry so much, your body won't produce any more tears.
Mm.
It stops producing tears.
When you stop crying,
No,
when you cry so much,
when you cry
too
so
much.
much,
Okay, got that.
not too much,
Yeah, so much,
when you
over and above.
cry
Just
so much, your
wow.
body will not produce. You
Did y'all hear
cry out
that?
of tears.
Cry out of tears.
I didn't have any more tears,
Oh
but
my
my body
gosh.
was crying. My
Mhm.
body would go through the same motion, but there was no tear. It's like it ran out of water. That's
Wow.
how much. And so
Mhm.
those tears, though, they didn't go wasted. And I know that.
Yeah.
And that's what the scripture tells us.
Wow.
But your life can be that low,
Mhm.
but then you can have joy again.
Yes.
It may take some time,
May take some
and I'm
time.
here to help you.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's why I'm telling this story. I'm telling the
Mhm.
story to give God the glory
Yes.
and to let you know
Yeah.
you can make it
You can make it.
no matter what. I, you know, I, it, anyway, so much to unpack in all of this, but I
Yeah.
do want to thank Mega Women International for the sponsorship of this
Mhm.
show, and
Yeah.
them understanding again, Dr. Marina, what when you say it's time for me to tell my story,
Yeah.
that the women would
Yeah.
understand that. Kelly Wingate with Alternative Wealth Partners.
Mhm.
Thank you for partnering with us. And Cheryl Smith with Texas Metro News. Thank you, ladies,
Yeah.
for supporting and being
Yeah.
behind this. And
Yeah.
ladies, I want to say to you, there's going to be some special materials and special
Mhm.
resources. Go to our website.
Yeah.
I'll be doing special coaching sessions, on
Mhm.
depression and whatever. After you hear this story, there's going to be some things you'll have questions, you'll have stories. We want to hear that because we've built the community in the Vibrant Womanhood Facebook
Mhm.
group. We're building a safe
Mhm.
community where you
Yeah.
can share
Yeah.
and we can support each other in the right way
Ooh, the
and
right
not say
way.
the wrong things. say unknowingly, but yeah,
Doing our
so
best to always say the right
yeah,
thing,
if
right.
you have not
Yeah,
joined our group, and
yeah,
please subscribe to the podcast,
yeah,
subscribe and share
mhm,
as we are on a journey
yeah,
to help women vibrantly live through their womanhood.
yeah. Well, I just wanna share this scripture, and I wanna thank you for, um, the journey you've been on, and we know that God, through this obedience of you sharing the story, is gonna just touch so many
Ooh,
more lives and use you for greater glory, right?
ooh,
Isn't that
Lord
what we
Jesus.
say, right? But Second Corinthians 4, and you can read the entire scripture, but I always turn to this passage of scripture when I want to be reminded of how good God can be and
Mhm.
how he can bring us out and through. There's so many scriptures, yea, though we walk through the valley of the shadow of death. But Second Corinthians 4 and 8, and I'm going to read it from the Living Bible. It says, we're pressed on every side by troubles, but not crushed and broken.
Mm.
We are perplexed because we don't know why things happen as they do, but we don't give up and
Mhm.
quit. We are hunted down, but God never abandoned us. We get knocked down, but guess what we do? We get up again and we keep going. I love that because it lets
Yeah.
us know, as Jesus said in his word, in this life, you're going to have troubles,
Yes.
but take heart, cheer up. I never understood that when I was down and out.
Yeah.
But just as Jesus faced the death that he did on the cross, he's come to clear a path
Yes.
for us
Yes.
not to be oppressed or taken out by
Mhm.
those troubles that we might find ourselves in. So we want to say to you, no matter what it looks like, no matter what it
Yes.
appears to be, it is the living Christ who keeps us safe and through right relationship with him
Yes.
that we can come through.
Woo. Lord, I'm so glad this is done and over.
But again,
Until,
remember, here we are,
yeah.
and we're removing the mask because
Oh,
as
Lord
vibrant
Jesus.
women, we want you to know the journey hasn't always been easy, but
No.
with the help of God,
Yes, we're
we have
here.
come through,
We're
and we've
here.
come through pulling upon the strength of womanhood
Yes.
and vibrantly
Live
showing up
vibrantly.
to display to you that with God, all things are possible.
Absolutely. Until next time, we will see you live vibrantly.